7:30, we'll start this meeting, bring the meeting to order. Start out with a, roll call. Over there, Joyce,
Lloyd Bryanowitz, Jim Young, Mark Blackmore,
David Morris,
Aaron Fargo, Joe Palulik, John Day.
thank you very much. We'll designate John as an alternate today. We'll go move to the pledge of allegiance.
The flag of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all for being here. Then. Any citizens' comments not going, any received tonight? Hearing none. We have meeting minutes to approve. We have meeting minutes from, May 1st and April 17th that got, tabled. Do we have a, motion?
So move.
For which one or both?
Oh. We have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? We need more time to look at them.
So the April 17th minutes were incomplete. It didn't have the exit of executive session or the adjournment information on the posted minutes. So that would need to be added.
Was that added to those minutes?
You don't actually go back and change the minutes. They're permanently there, but your amendments are noted in the next one, so we have to note that. The executive session, that motion is Joe Adaletta made a motion to exit executive session at 9:30. Seconded by Mark Blackburn, passing unanimously, and the adjournment was Joe Adaletta made the motion, seconded by Mark Blackburn, and that also passed.
So do we have to have a motion to amend that?
So that one, yeah, it would be. So the motion to approve, but those would be approved as amended.
Approved as amended. Is that all right with you guys?
Pretty fine.
He's got it. Yeah, it's.
Oh, her. Yeah.
For the record, note that Sid Logic, during the meeting 7:33. Thank you, Sid. Nice to see you. Okay, do we have any discussion on those? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstention.
Get that in.
Mark and John.
Okay, on to new business. Hey there, subdivision modification. Ups. And are you gonna speak for that?
Yes,
State your name for the record.
sure. Good evening for the record. My name is Greg Blaud. I'm a licensed land surveyor and owner of Killingly Engineering Associates. Before I give my presentation, I am going to hand off the notice to the adjacent landowners and the receipts. I know I had emailed those to Delia earlier. And we had also made a slight revision to the map, just in the wording on some of the calls for the buildings. So we have revised plans through the 14th, May 14th. So I would give you some hard copies of that. I also emailed those to her. So I'm representing the applicant, which is 55 Ojala Road Realty Trust, which is Elizabeth Fanoff. This is part of a subdivision that goes back to 1989. It was a 3-lot subdivision back then done by CME Associates. It's still, all 3 lots have been in the family ownership. Lot 15, which is 4.5 acres, is owned by 55 Ojala Road Realty Trust. And lot 15C, which is the corner lot that you see on the property, is owned by her son and his wife, Raymond and Carol Fanoff. So the proposal that they're doing is to merge the lots into one ownership so that the trust can deed it to the son. It'll become one combined lot. The lot that's lot number 15, has a couple of outbuildings on it that are noted. There's a couple of storage trailers. And there's another storage building to the central portion of the lot. If Delia zooms in there, you can kind of see those. So those two rectangles that are kind of in the middle of the screen at the lower towards the road, those are two storage trailers. And then up to the left corner there a little bit, that's a utility building there. There used to be a mobile home on this site, that was removed in 2013. The other lot, the corner lot, that does have a residence on it, with some outbuildings as well. So really, it's a simple thing. We're going from, two lots. One lot is 4.5 acres, the other one is 1.5. When we combine them, it'll be a total of 6.04 acres. So per your regulations, we're just here to seek approval of this modification. And then we would record a Mylar and record a new deed that would, the language would essentially merge these two parcels.
Was there, is there a well or septic system on this lot 15, C?
I believe there was
Or
it's
15, 15?
I'm sorry, which one? The one that had the mobile home, lot 15?
Yes.
Yeah, so there was a septic system and they weren't quite sure where it was. That's why they gave an easement to lot 15C at the time. If you read the deed, there was an easement saying that if any part of the septic system was over, that it would become, that they would have rights to do it, but we don't know exactly where it is. It's,
That was there in 89 when this was done.
that's correct. That was in 89,
So
yeah.
it's not something that's been added since the land.
No, there's been nothing new done to it. So, and again, it's been vacant since 2013, and I'm unsure of the well, nothing visible. They may be sharing a well out there is kind of what the thought was on that, but we don't know. Or they were sharing, because there hasn't been anything on there in some time, 12 years.
Okay.
And I did check with the Northeast District Department of Health for the merger. There is no requirement of a B100 review. If we were doing a lot line adjustment and making one lot smaller, there would be that requirement for the lot that was getting smaller. But since we're merging two, there is no requirement. If they do have any septic systems or tanks that they want to abandon or discontinue or remove, they do have to, the installer or the contractor would have to do permitting with the health department on that. But I don't think there's any known location of where anything is here.
Anybody else have any questions?
Pretty clear.
They met all the requirements for the town?
Yeah.
I think whatever fees that.
I provided the minutes of the last subdivision approval, and they included the previous map, and or I emailed it, so it could be, you know, your stuff.
Yeah, well, I just want to make sure that everything was square. Down. Okay. So do we have a motion on this
I'll make a motion. Second.
to approve the?
Yes.
Merge? Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you for your time tonight.
Brings us to B, the zoning permit for its Auto Realty Group. Just as far as I can see, just business moving into the building where the town restaurant is, correct? Is that where it is? Looking at the storefront and they're kind of.
Yeah, it's that end unit.
Yeah.
The northernmost.
I think it's pretty clear on the application.
Well, it's right now it's just an empty room. And doing reconfiguration that requires building permits.
Yeah.
Be the thing. Right now, they're just proposing it that. I think we have the applicant who on our Zoom meeting.
Oh, okay, yes.
Yes, I'm on here.
Okay, great. Do you have anything to add?
No, I was just inquiring, I inquired last week with the owner for leasing the space for my real estate office, and right now oh, sure, I'm Kathleen Spizzato.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And basically just a small independent broker. I have a few independent agents that work with me. I have an office in Sturbridge currently, but I was looking to move it to Woodstock. And I had inquired at this location with the owner, and then I actually talked to Dan about the process with the town to be able to have that approved as an office space.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions or comments from the commission?
So I'm a little bit confused. Was this not an office before? I thought Villager was in that space.
I don't know.
I think it was a Shake Shack for a while.
It was villager and then it was nutritional.
Different.
So is a business required to get a zoning permission if the same kind of business goes in this place?
I've covered this many times, but maybe you weren't here the last 20 times I covered it, but every time the business turns over, if we don't make a record of it, then we won't know when the change goes from something that's allowed to something that's not.
Okay.
But it has to be documented.
Well, does it have to come, just can the zoning enforcement officer do it, or does it have to come through?
Well, the way your
Because it would be
regulations are
documented.
written, it comes here, but it doesn't, you could write regulations that staff would do that.
For a non-residential zoning permit, which this is, a change of business, for non-residential zoning permits, it has to change rather.
In the future, if you wanted to do it differently, you could write a regulation where the staff can do that.
Any other comments? Do we have a motion, please? Second. All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? So moved. Thank you, Kathleen. Welcome to town. Hope you do
Thank you
well.
very much. Thank you.
That brings us to Joe's moment in the spotlight.
I guess so. I
I'd
hope
like
I don't
to
bore
read
you.
by famous Joe.
All right, the question came up, a little bit more detail on some of these subdivision plans. I have reviewed several subdivisions in the past. I actually did a couple.
You want to just? We all know you're well qualified. Just take your qualification for the record.
I'm a licensed professional engineer in Connecticut. Also was licensed in Rhode Island, New York, and Colorado. Worked for the federal government for 40 years. 2 years with the Corps of Engineers and 20 years as a private consultant.
Thank you.
So I'm pretty old.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to. I mean, we all knew that you're very well qualified. I just wanted to.
No, that's okay.
It sounds kind of.
All right.
To me.
All right, the first thing, and there's a lot of basics here, and I'm gonna bore some of you folks. Anyway, what we just reviewed from that guy, he did an excellent job with the boundaries for the proposed consolidation of those two lots. But anyway, the first thing we ought to look at is what type of survey have they done for a subdivision? And surveys basically in this state survey accuracy, I should say, go from AA to D. Now, what we have accepted across the board pretty much in Connecticut is A2. And what A2 means is that it's accurate horizontally 1 in 5,000. So that means you can be off about a foot in a mile. So 1 in 5,000. If it were AA, it'd be 1 in 15,000. But accepted for subdivisions in Connecticut, we accept A2. The basis, a lot of the horizontal basis was set up in, the vertical basis was set up in 1929, and then again in 1983. Mean sea level, the sea level keeps changing. So they've updated it from 29 to 83, and they'll probably do that again. A lot of times on a plan view, they'll also show benchmarks, control points. If you see the term IP, that usually means iron pin. You see a note about monuments, usually MON. The topography set again up on this vertical datum of 1983. If it says on the map that it's a T2, that means that it's accurate. It's basically 2-foot contours, and any point on that map should be within a foot of what's shown on the map. The key about topography, you learn a lot about a subdivision with the topography. And one of the big things that you learn is the drainage patterns and the flow elevation of all of the runoff that's going to come from the different parts of the subdivision. So it's important that you take a good look at those 2-foot contours, see where the water's flowing, where's the potential erosion going to take us, where is it going to take the pollutants, where is it going to take the sediment, and that's where you're going to want to put in the detention basins or catchment basins to collect any pollutants that are coming off of the proposed subdivision. All right, going back to this A2 and stuff, the first job I did was in chains and links. And actually, I looked at a piece of property on Sherman Road, Betsy Japp's property, and that's still, the boundaries for that are still in chains and links. So you've got to convert that. A chain is 66 foot. 10 square chains is an acre. So it all goes back to some early English stuff. I did that for the land bank program with ASCS way back when. The farmers got paid for not planting crops on certain parcels of land. And so I went out and measured. So that was all in chains and links. So if you see that on a map, that's basically what it is. And it needs to be brought up to current standards.
Joe,
Yep.
is each blade 1 foot?
No, a link is 8 inches. There's 100 links.
Oh, 100.
There's 100 links in a chain. So each link is about 8 inches.
What about rod?
A rod is 16 and 1/3 foot. So on some of our old roads, you'll see the road width is 2 rods wide or 3 rods wide. You go out in the Midwest, you'll see 4-rod road, 6-rod road. So just multiply it by 16 1/3. And there's 6 rods and 100 foot. The other thing about the topography, it shows the steep areas. And those are areas generally that we don't construct on, or we don't want the developer to construct on. And I think we have 15% in our regulations that we don't want contractors to build on. I did an environmental review team visit in Avon one time, and they were building on almost sheer cliffs, and they were blasted. So if we ever came to the point where the land became so valuable in Woodstock, we may have to waive that 15% and let them blast and put it in. Driveways, if we go to the the particular sheet that had the driveway, that was one thing that really stuck out to me, was how steep the driveway was proposed for the subdivision. Right here's the topography of it, and you can see those contours are real close together right here. And if you go to the sheet that shows the profile of the driveway, I don't know which page it is, but anyway, it's there it is. Back up there, right up here at the top. You see how steep that thing is? That's 9%, very steep. And what surprised me was that the developer is proposing a gravel road on that 9%. And I can pretty much guarantee you that that's going to erode. I think our regulations say that anything 10% or steeper has to be bituminous coated, bituminous asphalt paved. But he's got gravel here, and I'm sure there is going to be a problem along that road. Okay, the scale generally for the plan view of the overall subdivision, you could go 1 inch equals 100 feet. But for septic system designs and more detailed designs, we're looking at 1 inch equals 40 feet. Okay, that's it for the survey. All right, let's go back to the next. I wanted to talk about the wetlands and the soils. Here's a wetland right here that's been delineated. There's another wetland right here that's been delineated. We didn't worry about wetlands and water courses until 1972. In 1972, Congress passed the National Environmental Protection Act, and that has been amended many, many times, and it's now known as the Clean Water Act. But anyway, in 1972, it gave the authority to the Environmental Protection Agency and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to regulate all bodies of water that were navigable initially. And of course, that's changed. Now we've gone down to streams that show on the topo map as blue. We've gone to wetlands like this. We've gone to a lot of small swampy areas, etc. Vernal pools, that's a big issue. So anyway, the Corps of Engineers and that doesn't mean that you can't build in a wetland. It's just that if you do, let's say somebody decided to build a pond in this wetland, you could do that, but you got to get permission from the Corps of Engineers. And well, what happens is EPA and the Corps have delegated some of the responsibilities to the states. So the state had to establish an inland water resources section in order to deal with wetlands and water courses within the state. They could revoke that at any time. It's a federal law, but they did that because they don't have enough people with EPA in order to enforce their own regulations. The state in turn then gives power to the towns to have their own agency. So it all gets delegated down. So that's kind of the history of the wetlands. Now, how are they determined? Well, the other thing, when it was first being established in Connecticut, the soil scientists in this state lobbied the legislature and got it through the legislature that wetlands in this state will be basically established by soil scientists. Dr. Harvey Luce at UConn was one of the leaders of that. And Ed Sauter from the Soil Conservation Service was one. But anyway, in this state, you need a soil scientist to delineate the wetland. And there's a wetland there. And if you notice closely on there, they have WF all the way around it. And that WF, all that means is a wetland flag. In other words, the soil scientist goes out with an auger and he augers a hole down and he determines with his Munsell soil chart, etc., determines the color of that soil. And from that, he can determine whether it's a wetland soil or it's an upland soil. And so that boundary between the wetland soil and the upland soil is where he puts the flag. And he does that around the whole perimeter. And then the surveyor has to come in and actually survey those in. The other part of this wetland bit is in this state, they want a 100-foot buffer, regulated buffer beyond the wetland limit. So that's this line here that you see. All right, so we got one line for the where all the wetland flags are. We got another line for the buffer. Again, you can construct in the buffer area, you can construct in wetlands, but the permitting process is onerous and timely. And so most of the time, and our engineer on this subdivision that followed this, basically avoided just from a permitting standpoint, avoided building anything within the wetland or within that 100-foot buffer. And most of the developers will do that.
Can you build it in the buffer?
Oh, yeah. But you got to get approval, but it's going to take, yeah.
Tellingly, they had an open review area of 200 feet.
What's the definition of a water course?
Do you know, Dan?
No, water course could be a ditch. You know?
But it'll be called out of the drawing.
No, not necessarily. No. Obviously, if it shows on a USGS map that it's a blue line or a stream that flows most of the year, then yeah, that would be shown.
So is there a minimum size for wetlands?
No,
It can be down to something the size of this room or smaller?
it could. If it's a vernal pool, and somebody's documented that that's the only place that tree frogs breed in that area, then it's probably going to be sacred. There was a big court case up in Alaska a couple years ago, and the local people won there against the EPA. They did build in a vernal pool area and they won, but that went all the way up, I think, to the Supreme Court. So wetlands are a touchy legal issue and they're constantly going before court. Now, in this part of the country, in the Boston area of the EPA and the Waltham area of the Corps of Engineers, we are very strict in this part of the country. I've talked with working for the federal government, I meet with people from the Cincinnati district, the St. Louis district, the Portland, Oregon district, and things that I had to do, they didn't have to. So we're in a very strict part of the country as far as following wetland rules. Okay, that's the wetland flags and that's what those lines are. Okay, conservation easement.
Yeah, in preparation for establishing wetland flags. Do they do soil samples over the entire property? And to see what's wetland and what isn't?
Yeah,
So,
they'll look at the property and see all of the obvious wet areas.
right,
And they'll base that primarily upon the obligate, what they call the obligate wetland plants. So there are certain plants that are obligate wetland. And skunk cabbage might be one of those, obviously pickerel weed, water lilies, those are obligate wetland plants.
high root systems, or, they hit that, high water table.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to note in Massachusetts, they include plants in what the wetland, in Connecticut, they don't. In Connecticut, it's only by soil type.
But they do, so how frequently and how close together the soils?
Well, you can see what he did here. These are fairly close together. That's up to the soil scientist, but,
And,
you know,
and does it matter what time of year this is done?
no. No, a soil scientist can tell whether it's done in September or whether it's done in April, based upon the soil profile. So if it's black, basically black soil all the way down, that's gonna be black year round, whether it's summer or winter.
It doesn't matter if it's actually wet when you look at it.
Right.
I was the wetlands agent in Killingly and I'm the zoning officer here, and people would come in all the time and they'd say, but I don't have any wetlands, it's dry. It doesn't matter about that. It's what's the soil type. So it might be dry when they go out to look at it, but the soil scientist would actually take a sample and then determine if it's really wetland soil, even if it's dry. And just because it rains and there's a lot of water everywhere doesn't mean you have a lot more wetland. It takes a long time for water to change the character of the soil. Like if it was saturated for quite a long time, you could actually change it into wetland soil. But it's not gonna happen overnight or even in a couple of years. Probably would take more than that.
So Joe, how does the soil type and the topography interrelate? In other words, you were worried about that driveway being steep. Throughout a property, aren't there areas where there, during a heavy rainstorm, there's like rivulets or rivers sort of flowing, and so how does somebody valuing the property know that?
Okay, well, that,
You're gonna get that?
then you're coming into what the engineer is being hired for. And that is to determine where to put in lined waterways, where to put in grass line waterways, where to put in culverts, what size of culverts, all of that. So that's basically an engineering question. Right here's the conservation easement. See all these calculations up here. You know, initially on our regulations, we call for 2.5 acre lots. Okay, but by the time you take out wetlands, you take out conservation easement, any other easement that might be on it, you wind up with something maybe a 1.25 acre. And I think our regulations call for a minimum of 1.25 acre that's buildable. And that's what all these calculations are here. And this is in our subdivision regulations. I think it's section,
When it comes to the.
it's chapter 6.
To address in the future,
I'm sorry.
there's inconsistencies in the regulations. So when you're doing a minor subdivision, it's not based on 2.5 acres. And in the zoning regs, we still have old language from the old subdivision regs, so it's quite inconsistent at the moment.
All right. You gotta suggest we change something.
Yes.
All right. Anyway, those calculations that you see there, those are in our subdivision. And he has done them correctly. Apparently, I'm sure our planner checked the calculations to make sure they were right. So here, so going back to, we've got a lot of other people that are helping us before this thing gets to us. For instance, Dan and the Wetland Commission have already been through any wetland possibility problems that are going to come up. And if it's within their area, in their regulated area, or in the wetlands themselves, then they'll take care of it. But when you get outside of their regulated area, they don't have any jurisdiction. And that's where we're gonna have to take a look. For instance, I brought up the fact with that storm drain, going up to where the storm drain comes across the road. There's a storm drain from DOT right here. Now, see, the Wetland Commission wouldn't even look at that. But if this is eroding and causing a problem, then it's up to the engineer to pick that up. And it's up to us to make sure that he's picked it up and has designed a waterway, either lined waterway or a vegetated waterway in order to handle that flow. And that's why I brought up to him that, you know, if this were a big culvert with a big drainage area and it's headed right down towards that guy's septic system, that's not a good idea. Because it's gonna flood out his septic system. I checked the drainage area, there isn't much on this, but if it were large, some kind of a waterway or ditch or something should be designed to convey that water safely down to the well. The same way with the driveway, remember I said it was steep, real steep. There probably should have been some kind of a waterway along it, all the way down. Now, what he's done, going down farther. What he did do with the first time the engineer came in, if you remember, he had a low area here and this area just for infiltration. Well, that's a no-go. I mean, that was no design. I don't know whether he was trying to save money or what, but there's no way you want to put a low area in a main driveway that's it goes to 5 houses. So anyway, he had to come in later. At our recommendation, we said, you're gonna have to get our engineer to take a look at it. So bring that on down. And our engineer caught it. And where is it? Yeah, it's on another plan.
I can bring those up.
Yes. And he actually had them design, I should say, a detention area and sediment basin area.
Joe.
Yep.
So the engineer reviewed this, did they catch that, or was this because you looked at it and kind of triggered them?
Well, I triggered them, but we also, as a group, required that, we said, has our engineer looked at it? And as soon as our engineer looked at it, if he was doing his job, would have told the developer, you gotta do something different here.
Yeah.
So
Because we have to rely on them.
we do have to rely.
Qualified review. You weren't here to look at it, I'm getting this like, oh, look, that
Right.
wasn't done correctly. We have to
Right.
an engineer to find that, so.
Right. But design professionals did catch it. And, what the engineer has to do is figure out how much drainage area goes to this area. So all the driveway coming down through here, actually, he put a boundary in for the sub watershed that feeds that basin and designed the basin accordingly. And, how did he design it? Well, basically designed it. One of the practices, and this is in this one, this is a 2004 Stormwater Quality Manual that you hear talked about. It's been updated to what, 24? Okay, but this is the old one. But all those stormwater practices are in here. You can just pass that around and look at it. And then the same with the, Marla Butts and I was one of the main editors of this. Marla Butts and I and some other folks. The erosion and sediment control guidelines, and in 2003, we went around the state and provided training to different engineering groups and planners on the use of this manual. So this is the E&S manual, and you see all those different E&S practices that are on one of the sheets in the subdivision there. And they're just basically verbatim out of this book.
Has that been updated or is it?
No, this is 2002. I don't know what the new one is.
I think they've,
I think they both did it, Dave.
yeah,
Look at what
I
they-
think maybe 20, but primarily, most of these practices came out of from the Soil Conservation Service of the Department of Agriculture. Which we had, well, that agency was started in 1935, so they had a whole menu of different practices. So many of them are in here and just updated. So that's all the practices in there.
Joe?
Yep.
A real super simplistic point of view. Is the erosion and sediment control manual applicable in the construction phase? And the stormwater manual is applicable once it's built and how it'll function indefinitely?
Yes, they're both applicable. They're both applicable.
They both have to be reviewed by.
Yeah, they both have to be reviewed. The E&S manual is not only during construction, but it's also after construction. Keeping track of making sure that the vegetation stays. If it's a sediment basin, because there's some duplicity here. Some of the practices that are in that handbook are also in that handbook. So now the other thing that I brought up was I wanted to see on the plan view, I wanted to see both a erosion and sediment control plan and a stormwater management plan. And both of those are called for in our regulations. And the developer didn't do a very good job of putting them on the plan view. I don't know as it's on that view anyway. Do you know? Julia?
It says the erosion sediment control plans on it. I mean, the erosion sediment controls, and there's two different plans. So, can you zoom in a little bit? And every company uses slightly different style of their features on the map, so it's gonna look a little bit different. But And you see this little line here with like the little dots on it? That's the silt fence. And they're showing their limits of clearing is the upper line. The limits of clearing is not the same thing as the silt fence. The limits of clearing is supposed to be the extent of where they disturb. And then you put your erosion sediment controls and staked K-bills or the silt fence where you need to contain any sediments should it rain or flood or whatever.
Right, now the other thing about topography on here, we went over if you look closely, the light lines on here are existing topography. Like this one here says 786, 782 on down, so you know the water's going that way. But the other topography that's on here is the proposed topography. And that's in darker topo. So it not only shows the existing topo, but it also shows the proposed topography. And that was one of my questions here was, this elevation that he had here, I can't read it. But this elevation that he had as proposed topography was actually higher than the garage door entrance. So when I said to him, what are you going to do to prevent this water from just coming down the driveway and going right into the garage? So it's important to not only see the existing topography, but the proposed topography. All right, erosion and sediment control plan should include the sequence of installation as well as the operation and maintenance of the of the best management practices. BMP means best management practice. So not only the sequence of installation, but the operation and maintenance of those BMPs after they're installed. And the same way with the stormwater controls. There's a hell of a lot of lines on there, John. You're right. There's a lot. All right, test pits and percolation. More stuff. Okay, remember he said that one of the lots wasn't approved. In the beginning, he said lot 5 wasn't approved because they get ledge. And by the way, ledge is a local term. When I first transferred here from New York State, people talked about ledge, and I kept thinking, have they got that many outcrops where you can jump off of an outcrop of rock? And I found out that ledge in Connecticut is bedrock. Everywhere else in the country, it's bedrock. So ledge is bedrock. All right, so he had bedrock here, shallow. They didn't have the 4 foot, a minimum of 4 foot clearance from the surface down to bedrock. So he had to move the test pits, and that's what this is here. These are TP12, TP13, TP1. He had to go back out and do more test pits to show the health department that he had that 4 foot clearance above bedrock. And so all those, somewhere on the plans, it would show the logs for those test pits.
Probably in the last sheet. Do you want to?
Probably the last page.
Did you want to look at that?
No, I just wanted to bring that up, that's, when you see this TP, that means test pit. And normally those are 8 foot and they're done with an excavator, not by hand. And then the perk holes, there should be pH on here someplace. I don't see perk hole on here.
Can you use the test for hole?
No. No, a perk hole, a test pit is a big excavated hole with an excavator. And it's 8 foot deep. A perk hole is 4 inch. A perk hole is 4 inch diameter. Just a 4 inch diameter. And usually about 30 inches deep. And that is the reason the engineer does that is, or the sanitarian, is to determine the infiltration of the water into the profile. And you come up, well, anyway, after that hole is dug, you saturate it, you let it sit for a while. You're supposed to saturate it for 24 hours. Then the engineers or sanitarian is supposed to come back the next day and fill the hole up and then take measurements as time goes on of how that water settles down into the profile. And that determines, it might be 1 inch drop in 10 minutes, it might be 1 inch drop in 60 minutes. If it's 1 inch drop in 60 minutes, you're gonna need a huge septic system. If it's 1 inch drop in 10 minutes, not so much. If it's 1 inch drop in 5 minutes or less, you have a problem too, because then you're in gravel and the effluent's gonna go everywhere. So anyway, and all that is determined by the Northeast Health Department. So the engineer, even though this shows septic systems on this map, those are not necessarily the final. Because each lot owner is gonna have to go in and get approval from Northeast Health in Brooklyn. And so additional test pits may be required and additional perk holes may be required.
So they proposed mantis systems throughout that. I mean, that's a costlier type of system than technical. Why do you think they proposed mantis systems for these?
Because they take up less space. The engineers are always looking for different types of septic system, leach field areas that take up less space. Now, my personal septic system for my 3-bedroom house is 3 75-foot long trenches. 3 of them. So I've got a huge system. If I were doing that today, I would go more to something like this or various other products that wouldn't take up as much space.
But so what you were saying though, that is not the final design.
That's not the
They
final.
could, they could come in and propose a standard septic.
Yes,
Depending on who's gonna build them, you might have a builder that would build a generic square rectangle, but sometimes you're gonna have a house come in, it's not gonna look like that.
right.
It may be a different shape, it might be bigger or whatever. The health department wants to see the actual shape of the house and where they're putting it and how it's connected to the tank and the distance from the well and all that stuff. So they'll need an actual plan for the actual house that someone's gonna build, and it'll have all those details in the plan.
Joe, on a tough site, you might be squeezed between ledge, wetlands, wet soils, and may not have enough room for the kind of system you put in, so therefore, isn't that really why they shrink them down to
Yeah.
these smaller, more expensive to maintain footprints?
Yes, usually you're restricted, either by slope or by wetland or
Small lot.
small lot. I mean, look at the lots around Bungie Lake. I mean, they're all little bitty guys. So any new systems there are gonna have to go with something like this. There's just not enough room for a standard 3-foot wide trench, 75-foot long.
What are these systems called?
This particular one is Mantis, but there are a lot of different systems.
When I worked in Killingly, they had quite a few houses that were built with the round galleys, and they just put 2 round ones. And there was a big subdivision called Zador Heights, a lot of those houses, particularly on the side farthest from the road, that was not that far from the river. they did a lot of systems like that. And that was a long time ago. But I did hear that the state's supposed to be finishing their update to their standards for septic systems. But they've been working on them for years, but I've heard it's supposed to be coming to a conclusion soon.
Okay,
Joe, why are they, looking for a modeling line? What's that about when they're doing?
oh, the modeling. Yeah, the model, what that modeling line is usually a very faint orange line. That's on the soil profile, so you'd have to have the big test bed. 8 foot deep, 3 foot wide, whatever. And the soil scientist or the sanitarian or the engineer looks at it and looks at that profile, and the profile shows dark topsoil, and then maybe a little bit darker soil down here, and it starts getting lighter as you go down, or more gray. But there is a line in there where, and it's usually orange in color, very slightly orange in color, that indicates what the maximum high water table ever is in that hole.
So the-
And it might be only 30 inches down. It might be 4 foot down. It might be 12 inches down. If it's 12 inches down, that's a no-go, because modeling, and there, he actually showed, if it's less than 18 inches, if that modeling is less than 18 inches into the soil profile, you cannot put a septic system in there without building up the whole system. You can put a system in, but it's got to be all built up. And so you probably will wind up with a pump up system rather than a gravity system. Now modeling here, he's got 41, 29, 35, 28. See, these are all over 18, so there's no problem. But if these were less than 18, that would be a problem. And again, the sanitarian at Northeast Health would pick that up, hopefully. So that's what modeling is. It's that line of maximum water table.
And it happens because the water changes the composition of the soil, like affects the minerals.
So on in that one lot where they had ledge, if they couldn't find a spot, did they build up?
They could have.
It just would have been.
It would have been more expensive. But what the Northeast Health told them was, rather than doing that, you better look around on that lot and see if there is a
No,
place.
I understand. I just wondered
Yeah.
if they couldn't find a spot.
If you can't find one, well, two things. We could have prevented them from having a lot, I guess. We could have. Or he could have come in with a proposal and said, I'm gonna build it up.
Yeah, you just need something from Northeast Department of Health that says that's.
Right.
So-
I don't know if anybody on the commission in the room now, I think Joe Adeletta was on the commission, and Sid, when you had, the 15 lot subdivision on Odala Road in Rocky Hill. It's now open space, but Zimmerman bought the majority of it, but when we reviewed that subdivision, one of the lots had to be eliminated, it became a 14 lot because of the steep slope. It was, even though the distance might have been enough, there was the steep slope that was, the health department said the water would have come to the surface because of the slope, so it had to be farther apart, and then they had to eliminate the lot, they couldn't fit it with those 5 lots. The only time I've seen it happen here.
All right. All right.
Paige, tell us about the perk test results that we were talking about, even though we didn't see where it was labeled on the plan, they do show the perk test results. How much time it took.
Oh, it did? Okay. All right. All right. Any questions?
So is there any process, to evaluate how good a job was done by either the engineers, us, or anybody? Do we ever go back and go around the subdivisions and see, we did a great job here, we did a really crappy job there, et cetera? I mean, so how, I mean, this is all sort of, before the fact. Is there any after the fact?
Well, if a septic system fails, that obviously is one. If a well gets contaminated, because that's the other thing, wells here have to be a minimum of 75 feet from any part of the septic system. So if a well gets contaminated with septic, if the septic system fails, if there's excess erosion off of a driveway or, you know, that affects another property owner.
But do the engineers ever get feedback? Do we ever get feedback when things screw up?
Only if the town planner or the CEO tells us that there's a problem.
Well, there's occasional septic replacements around.
Yeah, septic systems get replaced regularly.
I mean, I guess I'm thinking about the driveway that's very steep.
Oh,
I'm
well,
just
that homeowners
wondering how
asso-
the homeowners are like that. 10 years.
the homeowners association is gonna have a problem.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to fix it. And they'll probably. The only reason I can see that he had a gravel driveway here to begin with was, he thought it'd be easier to pass and you'd get more infiltration. Because if it were a paved driveway, then you basically have X amount of square feet that are basically impervious. And you have to deal with that impervious runoff. And, which means a bigger basin in order to detain that water. So that you don't get more runoff than you did before the subdivision was put in.
So if the homeowners ever wanted to pave that, they would have to account for all that runoff.
Yeah, well, what's gonna happen is, yeah, what's gonna happen is the basin will be over taxed. Yeah, yeah, this is gonna erode. I have a gravel driveway and mine's only like 2% and I get some erosion on 2%.
So is that a reason to turn down a permit application?
No, but you could. You could change the rule that says 10% paving, say down to 5%.
So if you had a concern like that, you should always give the applicant the chance to address it. You could, and you wouldn't, I would think you'd have to back it up by representing some information from the town's engineer.
Right.
Because the town's engineer represents the town.
Right.
Joe can make all kinds of comments as an
Right.
engineer, and he would have to state his qualifications on the record and provide his resume. Because if you get appealed, you have to show in the record how you made it, your decision, and how the person who's stating a qualification, what their qualifications are. But I think if you were to make a decision, you'd want it to be from the engineer that the town, that represents the town. But you would give them a chance to come in with some kind of a correction. Like, this is how they propose to address the problem, and then you go back and have it reviewed again by the town's engineer. And then if they felt they've done it, and then the engineer doesn't think they've done it, then that might be something you could make a decision about. Like, sometimes we haven't been appealed for that type of reason, but you could be. And then if you were appealed, the court would want to see, how did you make your decision? It shouldn't just be, oh, well, I don't like it, or I think it's gonna be a problem. It has to be based on more substantial information.
One other line that, yeah,
So as we look at this, we say that 9% we don't require it to be paid, but 10 we do. And is there any leg to stand on to say that, because we're so close to the 10, we're gonna require that sediment area be made to accept a paved driveway?
yes,
So in the future, where they say that was a mistake, we need to pave this, yes, but the sediment area isn't big enough and it can't be.
Right.
We should have done that ahead of time, so now. You corrected a problem by causing a more failure.
Mhm.
Is there a leg to stand on here where, you get down to 6%, like, yeah, you guys are stretching it, but if it was that close, do we have a leg to stand on, say, we're not gonna approve this, unless you, you don't have to pave it, but you have to make an area for the inevitable.
Well, I just, once again, it's in our regulations, 10%. It's not 10%. We can say, well, this is what your regulation says, but you changed it. I understand where you're coming from.
Right.
But if somebody wanted to appeal that, they would have a clear basis to say. Your
I think if
regulations.
your engineer explained certain-
Yeah,
So if you base it on something that the engineer said that there was a real concern and directed them on how to relook at it, re-examine it, you might be able to require at least maybe even just a portion of it, not the whole thing. But as an example of when you ask for a failure, there's a subdivision on 169 where they had the original parcel had 2 houses. They did a pre-split to put up 1 house and then they subdivided the rest of it. So the existing house was on the next lot and then they built a new house, beautiful on the top of the hill. When it was designed, no one knew what was really gonna happen. When they went to dig it in to make the driveway, no one knew how much groundwater was in that hill. Groundwater started gushing out of the cut and it was causing an erosion problem. It's eroding onto the state road and the state wasn't happy about it. So the contractor was following the plan, but he didn't know when he cut into the hill, all this water is gonna come like shooting out of the hole.
Mhm.
So they had to come back and change the whole design. They had to pave the driveway and put in swales and put switchbacks to put the swales so it would go back and forth. And then they put in a little bit of basin and then one by the road. So the whole, changed the whole drainage, but you didn't know how much groundwater was gonna come to the surface when they cut into the hill like that.
Now yeah, go ahead.
So Jill's example, that's stormwater issue or whatever we're calling that. That environmental issue is the responsibility of the property owner. This example with the road potentially failing, that's the responsibility of the homeowners association. If this were a town road though, and there was some issue, failure, bad design or whatever, it would be the town's responsibility and cost to fix it. But that cost, is that assumed to be covered by the property taxes? There's no way to, I'm thinking very long term too. I mean, money can't be put into an escrow or have some,
There's usually a
Or some
performance
bond.
bond, and so for a period of time after the road. There's a lot of inspections that are done, and then the town has to go through a whole process to accept it. If they should have inspections done, and if something isn't done, it should be fixed before they accept it. But once they've accepted it as a town road, it's the town's responsibility, and they'll have to fix it.
and the town has pretty strict standards for their roads.
So you have a subdivision that was approved before I ever came here. It's called Timberland Drive, I think. And someone who bought a house there called me once and was upset about it. And they said, well, when are they gonna, the town gonna take over our road? We want it repaved or whatever. And I said, well, why would the town do that? It's a private road. And they said, well, because why should they have to do it? I'm like, well, you bought a lot in a subdivision with a private road. You know, you can go to the town, but I don't think they're gonna accept it as a town road. So I don't think they ever approached the town, or if they did, I never heard about it, but that's why private roads don't have to be built to the same standards as the town road. But it's still the responsibility of the homeowners association to maintain it. So we don't have, the town doesn't really have enough staff to be going in and double checking all these things years later. But if there's a problem, they would have to go and or come back in for a modification to show us a plan done by an engineer and how they would fix the problem.
so, for regular maintenance on a road or stormwater structure or something, town-owned road. Does the DPW have a checklist of all these subdivisions and all the structures they have to go in and maintain?
If they're town roads, then as part of their maintenance and thing.
if it's a town road, they're gonna have, it's gonna be town specs.
Right,
And then the town, when the town accepts it, then the town is gonna maintain those roads.
right. I'm just thinking like 10, 20, 30 years down the line.
So they try to plan the road so that they stay together.
As they say,
Well, that's
geez,
Dwight is probably the best response to this. I mean, look at all the private roads you have over on lakes.
But if there are retention ponds as part of the project, holding chambers and, other structures, the town, after the acceptance would take over that burden to make sure they're pumped out and cleaned and stuff. It gets pretty complex because, like, I know here in Woodstock, when certain roads were improved, there were retention areas built like on East Faucet Road. And, sometimes you can run into budgetary restrictions on some of that stuff. And then nowadays, some of the storms that we're getting, even like last night, for example, or today. Some of those areas aren't as big as they probably should be now. Because the types of rainfalls we get, and I know, in some of the projects that I've dealt with, they're actually oversizing things for these 4-inch rainstorms that we get. It's pretty interesting, and it's really important to keep those retention areas clean, because they'll take in a lot of it over time. And then if you don't take care of those, they'll overflow and damage private property and your.
There is one other line, that's not on this map, but, that's the floodplain zone. FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, developed, flood zone lines adjacent to, the larger streams. And that came up when they wanted to build the tower, or planning on building the tower next to Chase. If you remember, one of the 5 guys that was standing up here said that they would have to check out the Zone A flood zone from the FEMA map in order to not build within that zone. So that Zone A is generally a 100-year flood. And developed by FEMA, or FEMA hires engineers to develop it.
The FEMA maps are being updated.
Yeah.
Woodstock's kind of the last rung to get through the process, but when they're done, they'll be sending us actually draft language of what we're supposed to use, and then you'll have to do change to your town ordinance and to your regulations.
Right. And it won't cover all the little storms either. They'll only go upstream a certain ways. They generally deal with just the larger streams that, for instance, that have several square mile drainage area. But when you get down to 1 square mile drainage area or less, they're not going to deal with it. So then it's up to our engineer or us to say, wait a minute, we notice that stream floods, up to such and such an elevation, and have you taken that into account? So that would be just based upon what we have observed. Or we can always have our engineer develop a flood map too. But it would be expensive. So anyway, that's another line that sometimes is shown on the map.
May I add something?
Sure.
I've taught a site plan reading class before, and I worked in Killingly, so I was the wetlands agent there, and this subject came up a lot. The scale, when you're looking at the map, you should always check the scale, because sometimes when you flip the page, the scale is different. And if you forget that, then you're gonna completely miss some details. But when you go down to the title block, it should tell you the scale of that sheet of the plan. And then when you flip the page, you can just double check that the scale hasn't changed. Oops, sorry.
Yeah, that's 1 to 60.
And then when we send out you those reduced size plan, it's not gonna be an inch to the same thing anymore, because they reduced it, so you go by that bar, that black and white bar, and that. Because that changes when you zoom in, or if you scaled it down to print it. Because you're doing it proportionally, that bar is always gonna work for you. But if it says like 1 inch to 60, when you have the 8.5, I'm sorry, 11 by 17 size of the plan, don't use the 1 inch by 60, because that's for the full size plan.
I put you to sleep.
No,
No, no.
fascinating.
Okay.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Okay. That's very informative. Thank you, Joe. Do you have any old business? Any home occupations? Budget review and bills, I went in. Find a couple of checks for. Shopper guide, but nothing big.
Then the bills with the fair.
I signed the bills. They can send a check out or whatever, however it gets divided up. One of the signed word for it. That brings us to the CEO report. David?
Board in front of you, we had 6 administrative zoning permits issued since the last regular meeting. Ground mount solar, 8x10 shed. New single family home, another shed. Deck, and that storage container building that Roseland Golf Course is interested in. We had a couple bond releases. One was back from 2001. I've been trying to go through our list of anything that's still open and verify that it's got satisfactory ground cover. Wojnicki was the old one. We also had a bond we received last year that's came in pretty good. Beautiful grass for a house on Brickyard Road. I kind of went a little another direction here than typical. We talk about some of the context of the combined wetlands agent and CEO position. Just you know, for comparison purposes, there's some statistics. Average permit totals for that other commission. Wetlands takes up a lot of the activity of the combined wetlands agent CEO position. It's because many of these responsibilities are required statutorily. When we get down really to the core of it, enforcement, responding to complaints for zoning is almost the most discretionary task they give me. You can do it when you have the time. There's just no way one person, in my estimation, can do it all. I love this town. I wish I could do it all. But I think it's in excess of 32 hours, probably somewhere in the range of 40 to 45 to fulfill all the expectations and level of service that people are accustomed to. But the day-to-day zoning has never been interrupted. I answer at least a dozen inquiries a day from all range of land use questions. Some of them require pretty extensive research in the town clerk's office for old minutes, old maps, reviewing building department files, reviewing special permit files. Those tasks have there's never been a deficiency in being able to perform any of that. Where the hard part is grabbing the reins on an old enforcement matter that will monopolize a lot of the time that the office has. If I could even get to that stuff, like I'm threading the needle on the permitting for wetlands. And I invite you guys sometime to check out the wetlands webpage on the town website to just see what a typical meeting might have on it for number of applications, number of documents, how big an application packet is for one of these, any one of these wetland permits. There's a high level of detail that has to go into this. For the typical administrative zoning permit, we're looking for a site map, an application, a fee, and typically that's enough to do the administrative review. For wetlands, we need all those, plus Bungie Lake approval, plus watershed notification, DEP reporting form. And we're wrangling a lot of these documents to make sure that the applicant has a complete application. The permits must flow is kind of what the state pushes on these positions. And that the permitting requirements are not discretionary like the enforcement side of things are. That wetlands agency had for about 20 years averaged 33 permits per year. Last year we had 58. This year we're 19% above last year's number at this point in the year. So is my excuse. And a second excuse is some of these longstanding enforcement matters, they came before my time. Probably sometimes one or two people before me. They're challenging. They're hard people to deal with. There's a number of reasons why they've collected dust. But I hope that the future arrangement that they have with a firm, that they can delegate any kind of activity that's been deficient here to their team. They've got at least a combined experience of 100 years or more with the staff they have. I'm hoping that delegation, for the powers of delegation, that every aspect of the position that residents are looking for, the commissions are looking for, gets fulfilled with their expertise. This seems to be the way rural land use is it's moving. I don't know how many towns that firm works with, but I'm sure it's in the dozens. And it's a hard field to keep staffed. And budgets are tight. But aside from those matters, I'm tentatively scheduled to visit the dog training session next Thursday. I still have probably about 8 pages of line-by-line points that the resident made of what their activities are. And I have to just analyze it and see what might bring them into the permitting process or what might prohibit what they're doing. With zoning enforcement, this book is not black and white at all. I mean, it's open to interpretation. Whereas if it were a blight ordinance, it'd be black and white. You have tall grass, you got to fix it. A lot of these cases can be prohibited or a civil matter, use permitted as a right, or require permitting, special permitting. Our regs are a little less defined than some other towns, and it kind of creates some of these complexities when it comes to interpretation. I also think that this firm might have a good understanding of those complexities better than I do, even though I've got some years in this. I mean, they're all AICP, Casio, the whole thing. And I don't think they'd have as many excuses as I might have performing all aspects of the position. That's all I got. I don't want to hold up any more time. If anybody has any questions, call me, email, visit me in the office. I'm happy to look at something. My final report that I issue in June will be explain some of the continuity measures that I'm preparing for the transition, and cover probably some of the things I've done in the office while I've been there to kind of get our files, digital and paper, kind of in order. Not so much affecting this commission as my permits migrated to the building street file, but, the Wetlands Commission has kind of had to rebuild its record in a way. We've had some prior records disposals that have left us with limited information for certain areas at the time. And there always seems to be something cropping up that we could have used that file. But I'm happy to keep doing this. Like I said, I love this town. I went to the academy. Wish I could do it all, but it really is burning me out. So I hope this future arrangement delivers.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks,
Thank you.
Ian.
No,
Dan?
it's But, I wanted to share the email I got that I sent out to you from Gene Pillow. He's working on an update the plan of open space and then of conservation of open space. And they want to put that in, POCD in the conservation section. So, I don't know when that will come in. And that may sort of come into the end of June thing, but no one told me what's happening with the POCD. Do I just hand it over to the next planner? Does anybody know?
Not clear on that. I will find out. Have you heard anything, Joe, on your POCD?
No, what's the latest?
I was told that whatever you have is going to the next person and they're gonna do what?
Okay, so I'm gonna try to make as much progress as I can. But I don't think it's gonna be completely done. And then I'm waiting for the committee and for the Conservation Commission. And then when you have your draft, you wanna review it. And then at some point you'll have to do all your notices. You have to notice the Board of Selectmen and the public and all of that and have your public hearing. So there's a lot to do before you could actually approve it.
Appreciate all your work. We don't expect you to have a finished product. Just what you work out like that. No, it's not. Thank you for all your work. And the other communications was a letter from Dudley about a cell tower, and I looked at the map that just to see where it was. It looks like it's in Webster to me, but I don't know. No, not concerned about it. 3 miles away from us, so. I guess they just have to notice all the neighboring towns. Verizon is going crazy with power, probably all 3 at the same time. Anybody, just out of curiosity, has anybody heard anything on the public backlash on the towers that are proposed and stuff?
Seems just a little bit on Facebook, but they haven't been paying attention.
Yeah, no, that's mostly, it's just,
Only one individual.
just
You guys
curious.
got it easy. Back in the day, the room was full of angry people shouting. It's all the anger.
Everybody wants their cell phones to work every
Yeah.
time.
They
Well,
have
to me,
established,
to me,
hearing
it comes
aids.
down to a public safety thing. Because there are so many people. Consumer cellular, so many people have said, the heck with the landlines, they've gone to cell phones, and what is our 911 system with all these people that are relying on them? I don't get good coverage. With this jump up of the 5.
You're still not gonna get good coverage. where you are. Well,
We
maybe.
used to get, once you turned the corner down on Rosen Park Road, you got down by the condo there, you started to pick up coverage. Lucas is behind the elementary school on the phone in a tractor and lose it.
Yeah.
The coverage is just starting to move back toward Thompson where the last tower is. We're just not getting the coverage. It becomes a safety issue. I mean, people can't use their cell phone, you got no coverage. So they've got to do something. I mean, I think it's a part of, you can't cut off electricity because, it can be a hardship to a family, you just can't shut the power off. You can't shut somebody's phone off because they wouldn't be able to call for help, but I think our government kind of overlooked the fact that everybody's jumping on cell phones today and they haven't worried about, they worry about how the first tower that went off, but after that, it's been kind of like unbreakable. And, you know, the service is getting, the capabilities have gotten better with cell phones, the service have gone downhill because of it. It's not a good thing. So I know this one individual, you know, he gave a pretty good argument for what we ought to be doing. He still thinks he's not gonna be able to grow hair in his arm.
Well, I mean, we're changing overall our security and fire alarm systems in all school buildings and town buildings to digital dialers now. Because the cellular is so much faster than copper lines. And Frontier and everybody are phasing out the copper now, you know, because of the fiber. They want to get rid of them because they're old, they don't work right. You know, they got dirty lines.
They don't work right, because they don't take care of it.
Oh, you're right.
They want you to put it in fire. But them old copper ones worked when they were laying on the ground with a tree on top.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When there was no power, you could say, you know,
But the old fiber thing don't work so well, it's got a bump.
No. But the cellular communicators are a lot faster, a lot more accurate. You know, deal with drop off disconnects. It really stinks at 3 o'clock in the morning when you're getting an alarm call because of lost connection. You know, with the digital, you just don't get that. It's pretty interesting.
Well, they're great.
Tim, you're right on the money, but
Yeah, you're gonna be out there like this full of copper back
yeah.
out again.
Okay. Any more communications?
The two, from the siting council, regarding the, meeting date has been set,
Okay.
for those two tower proposals. I believe it's in July. Yeah, July 31st. That's also by Zoom. Starts with an evidentiary session at 2 p.m. and continuing with public comment section at 6:30 p.m. And I believe they're both on the same date. Oh, sorry, one's July 31st, one's July 17th. But same times. Mentioned.
So given a normal sequence of events, and given that timeline, assuming that everything went on a positive, when would you typically see a cell tower going?
Oh, I don't know. Delia, have you ever kept an eye on how long these get turned around?
It took a long time to get it back from the planning council,
Yeah.
but when they came in, they had to get a permit and they never, the people who come in don't even bat an eye at the fee.
No.
They're like, well, it's not, I'm not paying, it's the cell tower company, but I never really kept track of the timing. Just because there would be a gap of time where you wouldn't hear anything because of that planning council.
Okay. So down on to adjournment.
We'll do adjourn.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So.